Origins of Our Faith. CRMI presents Rick Richardson with a look at how events of the past affect the headlines of the future. Seeing the world today from yesterday's perspective as we discover the origins of our faith.
Well, this is Origins of Our Faith. My name's Rick Richardson. With me on today's program is Rabbi Pinchas Winston. He is the author of a number of books, including his latest book that we'll be talking about a little bit later, Not Just Another Scenario. Also is involved with writing quite extensively over the Internet, actually a whole number of different sites. Rabbi, you are just all over the place, aren't you?
Yeah, I sort of work independently, but it's a different age today because of the internet and websites. Everybody has their own site, and everybody's looking for material. And it's the same way you have shareware in the software world. Torah is something that we try to share as much as possible and to get out there. So I usually write it, and some places I have a certain ongoing relationship with, which they post on a weekly basis and subscriptions. Other places they either pick up the articles from my website or other websites which I have written. Aish is one of those places that I do articles for as well. Word gets around, and it's always often interesting to find out when you go to somebody's site, you find that your writing is there before you. Someone picked it up from some site, or someone passed it on and they posted it, and you go there by accident or whatever, and you find it there, and that's kind of what we're living in today, where it's just everything's flying around the internet.
Yeah, and even though the internet, as we have all seen, has been used for some pretty bad things, it is amazing how much is available out there and how much accessibility and so immediate everything is that we can find that are good things that just was not available 10 years ago before the internet became such a valuable tool.
It's absolutely remarkable, but it is, as you pointed out, it is probably the best replica of the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
Yes.
In the last 5,751 years. I mean, the amount of good that can be done is, as you said, it's mind-boggling, absolutely mind-boggling. Some days I just sit back and I look at what's going on, and I just can't even fathom how quickly things have changed and how much good has been done through it. On the other hand, we are very well aware of the fact that there's a lot of negative material out there that's very damaging, hates,
Sure.
things. So definitely it's a tremendous potential for good and tremendous potential for bad too.
Your latest book is a novel, is fiction, based on certain prophecies and other things that you find within Jewish writings. And it is what I've been calling the Orthodox Jewish version of Left Behind, the Christian scenario that most everybody's aware of about the end of days. But your writing is based on the Orthodox Jewish perspective of that same time period. Now, would that be a fair comparison as far as indicating what your book is all about?
Sounds pretty close.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, the idea behind the novel is that I've noticed through my teaching, I often go on speaking tours, and as you mentioned before, a lot of this material is material that I've been producing, or at least writing over the last couple of years. And you just find that people have difficulty relating to factual information, even though it could be so accurate to what's going on today. You have some people who automatically pick up and they read and it affects them. But it's like going to a movie. I produced a few videos as well.
Yeah.
And, picture's worth 1,000 words, they say, but the drama lends a whole different meaning to the information, and it goes into a person's mind and thought process much more easily, and they're more affected by it. And they're more ready to sit down and read in a couple hours as opposed to over long periods of time. So that was the idea behind that. And as you mentioned, the information is quite factual, but because it's a projection, and I have to add that my own imagination and my own vision of what that information could mean in terms of today and the events of today is a large part of it as well. But it's a wake-up call.
Sure.
To a large degree.
Now, first off, let's once again state that this particular novel is based upon certain prophetic writings. And these writings, oddly enough, many of them are not known that well by even some of the Jewish population.
That's one of the reasons why I wrote the book as well, and why I teach what I do. I'm often very, very surprised myself to come across different sources of information that are relatively mainstream. But anybody who's familiar with Jewish history knows that we've had our share of it's been a rough period for at least the last 1,000 years. And after the Holocaust, we lost to a large degree the cream of the crop in terms of the yeshiva world, people who spend their time learning a large part of the time, and for the most part, the last 50 years, people have been focused on trying to revive the Torah world. So like anybody who's not well, someone who's unfortunately becomes unwell, they focus on what's essential to regain their health. And that's more or less what's happened in the Jewish world, at least in the Torah world. When I say the Torah world, in the Orthodox world,
yes,
and that is that the yeshiva movement, for the most part, has focused on training people how to be able to interpret the oral law for the sake of making halachic, legal decisions, because it's a fast-changing world. It's a very fast-paced world, and there's a lot of Torah is very detailed, and an Orthodox Jew has to know exactly how to respond to the world around him on an ongoing basis. So for that reason, most of the focus has been on what I call the meat and potatoes of Torah.
Yeah.
And most of the sources that I refer to would not fall into that category. There are definitely, you should know, and there are definitely parts of the Jewish world that are quite familiar with these sources, and certainly have been aware of them for some time. But I'm trying to bridge the gap and bring to people, especially people, let's say, for the last 50 years or over 100 years, who have assimilated or their families have drifted away from Torah, and they have very little access to any of this information. So I'm trying to act as a bridge for these people to expose them to ideas, information, otherwise they might not have exposure to.
Now, our society today, it seems to me, is moving in a couple of different directions. Number one, there are people that want to get close to God, want to go back and find out what God says, and really have a desire to get back to the roots and the basics and the origins of where they began. And another group of society that's going more towards humanism, that's moving away from the Bible or the Torah and moving in the opposite direction. Do you find that there is a real split in society as far as we are emerging with two different groups of people?
It's interesting you should mention that. I mean, in my opinion, the way that it appears to me that this is definitely a realistic phenomenon taking place in the world today. That, and certainly historically, if one looks at, from the perspective with a belief in God and a belief in Torah, and a belief in that God is involved in the affairs of man, and he pays attention to what we do, that usually, there's periods, there's swings of time, from one end to the other end. But for a while, there was almost like an in-between group where you could kind of sit in the fence for some time. But it's our belief, and as I say, it's definitely my understanding of the situation that there comes a time when God says, "Okay, enough fence sitting, and you have to make a decision where you hold. You have to. I gave you a mind. I gave you, understanding to discern truth, and I gave you a Torah and wisdom and wise people to help you understand it. Now you have to get real with life and make a decision where you hold. And the events of everyday life sort of force the issue, and they make us make decisions. Whether we want to make those decisions or not, they make us make those decisions, and then a person is revealed for what they are. So I've seen it in the world in which I live around me. I see it in the world at large. It just seems to be a polarization of opinions.
And as we get closer to a time that we look to as being the time of the end of days, this is a time for people to make decisions and to decide where they're going to fall, what side of the fence they're going to be on. Now, your book actually deals with many people arriving at this time where they have to make the decision. And in fact, that's what a good part of the book seems to be about people getting to the point of making a decision whether they're going to believe in God, which apparently is something that some of the people find out that they really have no other choice than to turn away from atheism and some of the direction that they were heading. We'll take a short break here. My name's Rick Richardson, and this is Origins of Our Faith, and we'll be right back. This is Origins of Our Faith. Welcome back. My name's Rick Richardson, and my guest today is Rabbi Pinchas Winston. He is author of a new book called Not Just Another Scenario. It's a novel based on the end of days, based on the time period that we all look to as being the time that Messiah comes. Now, the interesting thing is that you put the time period very close from today. Even though on the Jewish calendar, we are about, 240 years from the year 6000?
Plus one.
Okay, so in relationship to our lifetime, we are quite a ways from the year 6000, and yet, as far as some of these significant prophetic events happening, we are a lot closer than what many people may suspect.
Well, especially given the events of today, what's happening in the Middle East. I mean, we have a situation here that's never really existed the last 40, 50 years, and maybe even longer, where it's, the problem exists on two levels. It's not just between the Arab population, the Jewish population, but even amongst the Jews themselves, who are being forced to make decisions and have to discern where we stand with all these issues and ideas. And because of that, this kind of no-win situation is what makes me nervous over here. At this point in time, it seems, one of the reasons that a peace agreement has not been arrived at, it seems to me quite clearly, is because we're just, both groups are talking in different terms. And it's very hard to come together when you have a situation arising. But, when it comes to Judaism, I'm sure, I guess also from the Christian point of view, when you're accepting the concept of divine providence, so it's not just an issue of making peace over here.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why the struggle is taking place is not just because, technically speaking or politically speaking, we can't arrive at a common conclusion. Part of our belief would be that this is one of the ways that God is talking to us at this late stage of history and asking us to wake up and to make decisions in return, like any father would want his children to come back. He's trying to open up the eyes of the minds of the Jewish people, the world around, and to make them realize what the most important issues are and to come to terms with that. We've had it very good for the last 50 years. I mean, there have been difficulties in different parts of the world, but certainly in America, where a good half of the Jewish population exists, life has been quite good, thank God.
Yes.
But, it is definitely, our belief that there is a better stage of history for the Jewish people, which we have to work towards. And when we don't do it on our own, we usually get some type of divine assistance to move in that direction.
Okay.
So that's why, for me personally, writing this novel and the urgency to write this novel and to place it in such close proximity of today's time period is because of what's going on in the Middle East and with Jews around the world.
Okay. Well, we are talking with Rabbi Pinchas Winston today. He is author of a number of different books and a writer, writes quite extensively on Aish.com and other various websites. His latest work is a novel called Not Just Another Scenario that we're talking about today. It is a novel based on the end of days, based on the time period that we're now in, and what that means, what that could mean for the world around us and the coming of Messiah and the period of time known as the end of days. Let me read just a little bit here from Not Just Another Scenario. As the Prime Minister spoke, the Minister of Security barged in carrying what were obviously aerial photographs. However, there was no need to look at them. Their message was written all over the Security Minister's face. The Prime Minister motioned for the Security Minister to have a seat. "I assume the Americans and the British know all of this, Shlomo?" the Prime Minister resumed. Silence. "Shlomo, are you still there?" "I'm still here." "Why haven't you answered my question? Do the Americans know?" "They know. Of course they know." "So why hasn't the President called me to discuss the strategy to nip this in the bud?" More silence. "Shlomo, why aren't you answering my questions? You always answer my questions. Why are you holding back from me?" "Mr. Prime Minister, the Americans don't know what to do. They keep telling me they're committed to our survival, but they're afraid to turn this regional conflict into a world war." "That's interesting. And when the Arab gun power flattens this region, what will they be committed to then? Grazing their cattle on what's left of this tiny country?" Impatient, the Security Minister forced the aerial photographs into the Prime Minister's view. His eyes widened and bulged as he beheld the true sense of his minister's concern. "Where are they getting all that from?" Apparently, the Palestinians were moving heavy artillery into the Arab-occupied areas. The Syrians and... The Minister of Security hesitated. "And what?" the Prime Minister demanded. "And the Jordanians." "The Jordanians? Are you kidding? Why would the..." the Prime Minister started to say, and then cut himself short. A cold chill went up and down his spine. Something he had not felt since he was a young boy. It made him feel like running home at that moment. Shlomo, get everything together, right away. We don't have a moment to waste. My office. No, make it the war room. As he hung up, he turned his face to the Minister of Security, who was whiter in his face than usual. What do you suppose this means? The minister asked in a tone suggesting he didn't want to hear the answer. Sitting all the way back in his chair, the Prime Minister rubbed his eyes thoughtfully, as to see if he was dreaming or awake. Refocusing himself, he said, I'm not sure I want to say, Dov. I'm not sure I want to say. Well, that is from the novel Not Just Another Scenario, and we are talking to the author, Rabbi Pinchas Winston. Now, whenever we get into talking about a subject like this, there are always people to say we need to be cautious, that we shouldn't go too far predicting dates, and in fact, sometimes people really shy away from even discussing the end times because of the fact that they might be focusing on this time, and that's believed to be dangerous and maybe even sometimes an evil thing to do. Do you find this something that you have to deal with as far as people really being reluctant to talk about this time, and consequently people don't really know that much about it because they are so reluctant to talk about it?
Well, as I have this expression, that I use for when I get involved in this sort of writing, that you can't stick your head in the lion's den and not expect to get nipped.
Yeah.
It's just one of these things. It's a controversial topic for a variety of reasons. It's, in a sense, on one hand, it's a topic that seems quite hidden. On the other hand, it's probably one of the most popular topics for the last couple thousand years amongst all groups and all believing individuals of all religions. And even in the business world, they have their own messiah, so to speak, of who they believe in, who leads them to success and not success. But the basic idea is like this: that it's a tightrope act. It's definitely a tightrope act. In our Talmud itself, there's quite a few references to what we call Mashiach, the Hebrew term for Messiah, and various different prophecies and various different statements, and it's spoken about quite casually. To be quite honest, and there's many different works over the last 1,000 years. But anybody who's familiar with Jewish history knows that we've had a series of catastrophes over the last 1,000 years. Dealing with people who either claim to be the Jewish Messiah, but in the end, the most famous one perhaps being Shabbatai Tzvi in 1648, who in the end left Judaism altogether, and it caused great panic in Europe. People went as far as selling their property and abandoning their businesses, and only to find out that it was a false individual, and they were stuck in a very serious situation. So you always have within every group, every religious group, you have individuals who don't always take things in the proper perspective.
We'll take a short break here. My name's Rick Richardson, and this is Origins of Our Faith, and we'll be right back. This is Origins of Our Faith. Welcome back. My name's Rick Richardson, and my guest today is Rabbi Pinchas Winston. He is author of a new book called Not Just Another Scenario. It's a novel based on the end of days, based on the time period that we all look to as being the time that Messiah comes. Now, a lot of times when we talk about the end of days, the discussion turns to chronology. In other words, we talk about what has to happen first. Where are we in relationship to what's going on around us? A lot of times we hear about the temple needing to be at least started, that certain parts of a cornerstone or something must be laid first. You put the chronology in an interesting order. You have the coming of Messiah right in the middle of the return of the exiles. Now, this may be just because I'm not that much aware of Jewish prophecy, but is this something universally held within Judaism, that this is the time that Messiah will come in the middle of the return of the exiles? It was something that I was not aware of and had not seen before. Or is this something that there's some debate on?
Well, this is one thing. It's not completely clear. Like
Okay.
these things are not outlined with 100% clarity. There are differences of opinions regarding this. I've seen different sources, but I've based myself upon one particular source, which I found to be very clear and very descriptive, and based upon other sources like the Zohar, other things. So that's what I more or less relied upon. And then part of, like I mentioned before, part of it's my imagination.
Sure.
How I visualize these things coming to be, how, based upon the knowledge I have and what's going on today, how this could come about, how this particular reality could come about using what's available to us today. The one thing I have found is that God is the ultimate, screenwriter, and he's got more things up his sleeve than any of us could ever imagine.
And if we knew exactly what the outcome would be, we could probably write something more fascinating than we could ever come up on our own.
He'll do it in the end. He does have the best-selling book of all history.
Yes.
And when it's all said and done, we'll look back and we'll say, oh, of course, it makes so much sense. Why didn't I think about that? Why didn't I put that in my book, But in the meantime, it's, like I mentioned before, the main thrust of the book is just to expand people's imaginations and expose them to ideas that are the basis for reality in the future as much as possible without stepping over the lines of what's proper.
Okay. And you use the current situation happening with the Palestinians and also Iraq and Iran and Russia, all the other players involved or what would be involved in the Middle East if an actual war broke out, if actual hostilities turned into something more. Now, one of the things also you talk about is something else that I was not aware of, is what you term as the spark of Elijah. Now, I know in Christian theology, as well as in Judaism, there is the belief that Elijah, in one form or another, will usher in the coming of Messiah. Now, in the book, that is in the form of a spark that the main character has in him, that is actually a spark from the soul of Elijah the prophet that is now residing within this character in your novel. Now, is this a universal belief within Judaism that this will happen at the end of time, something like this? Or is there some debate over exactly how this will come about?
Again, it's a fiction based upon fact.
Yes.
The whole concept of this character in the book is a personal theory of mine, but based upon a very true concept, and that is that most societies believe in reincarnation. Judaism is no different in this respect. It's not a foreign concept to us. And what might be a little bit different is when most societies think of reincarnation. I can't speak really for all religions. I'm not familiar with all religions' ideas, but I assume that for the most part, people assume that the entire soul, if it's going to reincarnate, will go from one person to the next person, the next lifetime. Whereas in the Jewish belief, it's not necessarily so, that a soul can actually splinter the same way that Adam was once one individual in the Garden of Eden, possessing, in a sense, all the souls, the totality of mankind, that once after he committed the mistake that he did in the Garden of Eden, and societies formed after that, all those souls are kind of like branching off and breaking off from his. So we have this idea of sparks where it's not the entire soul of an individual, but the souls can splinter into pieces, and they maintain an aspect of their characteristic. So I've had this theory. You look around the world today, and you find the world, just like in the business world, you have what's called movers and shakers, so to speak.
Yes.
You find in the spiritual world you also have the same thing as well. People who are extremely motivated to carry the message, what they perceive as the message of God, or in our case, taking towards of the world, but not just taking towards of specifically the Jewish people, and on top of that, trying to awaken them to higher levels of understanding. So other people are completely unmotivated when it comes to this. And you stand back and you wonder why one person versus another person would do this, even if he himself is not aware, or she or herself is not aware of what's going on, but they just have this inner motivation. So based upon this idea of reincarnation sparks, I just projected that there are quite a few people today in the Jewish world who are having a very strong impact on thousands, if not tens of thousands of individuals. And, they have this inner strength to them that seems to be outside the realm of the average individual walking the street today. So I just projected this concept by suggesting that these people may possess special sparks of special souls of individuals whose job it has been in Jewish history to do exactly that. Not the full soul,
right,
as the book says, because that's Eliyahu, we call Elijah in Hebrew
Yes.
is Eliyahu, he is somebody who will come, according to our belief in the end, and herald the coming of the Mashiach. And he will be himself, in totality. But in the meantime, it's very possible that aspects of him could be in the world, so to speak, and collectively acting as in his role to some degree in different parts of the world, in different languages, in different capacities. So that's an idea that I sort of put into the book because I felt it was a very appropriate way of interpreting people's involvement in the events of today.
My guest is Rabbi Pinchas Winston. He is author of a number of different books, including Not Just Another Scenario, a novel written about the end of days. Also actually wrote the text of a book that I found just invaluable as far as understanding the basic concepts of what the Bible's all about. And it's called Bible Basics, and he is the writer of some of the text of that book. Let me read a couple of the things out of here because I think it's just great writing as far as understanding the concept of what the Bible is all about. It said the commandments were given by God and in all the Bible to teach mankind to achieve the ultimate satisfaction of life through acquiring the character traits that are essential to living a fulfilling life. A lot of times when we think of the commandments and things in the Bible, many times people think that those are rigid rules, but these are basically instructions that God gives us as far as how to live our lives the best possible way they can be in the most fulfilling way. And I just appreciate your perspective that you have on here as far as talking about the stories and everything else, all being part of God's way to communicate to us to live our lives in the best possible, manageable way.
Right.
We are talking with Rabbi Pinchas Winston. He is author of a number of books and also does quite extensive writing on various websites throughout the internet. We'll take a short break here. My name's Rick Richardson, and this is Origins of Our Faith, and we'll be right back. Well, this is Origins of Our Faith. My name's Rick Richardson, and my guest is Rabbi Pinchas Winston. He is author of a number of different books, including Not Just Another Scenario, a novel written about the end of days. Also actually wrote the text of a book that I found just invaluable as far as understanding the basic concepts of what the Bible's all about. And it's called Bible Basics. Now, you have here written about the various things that I think are essential to find out about. One of them is the whole concept of holiness. That's something that a lot of times, I don't know how it is among the general Jewish population, but I certainly know among the Christian population that sometimes we get words that tend to end up being fairly trite as far as the way they're used, and we don't really understand the concept behind them. Holiness seems to be one of those words. Can you explain a little bit about the whole concept of what holiness is?
That is definitely one of the, it's a concept shared amongst all societies, and which definitely people have to be aware. Ever since God made man in the image of God, already that statement alone is telling us that man has a potential to be holy and has to understand the concept of being holy and to pursue that. And like a lot of concepts, they can be taken in the wrong direction, and rather than create holiness, can create the exact opposite, which has happened over history. But the gist of the idea is that being holy from God's perspective is that a person should pursue that aspect of him that develops him into somebody who resembles the way God acts. Obviously, you can't resemble God himself. He, in essence, is not physical in any respect, but he has displayed to us through his Torah and through history what is important to him, what counts the most, what human potential is all about, and how to best go about achieving it. And that free will is obviously the key factor in the entire thing. and trying to tell us and allow us to understand that man has two sides to him, and rather than simply capitulate to the side that seems to be the strongest, but is not necessarily the ultimate expression of man's potential to be godly, that a person should use their free will to separate themselves away from those things which tend to drag him down and to make him more like an animal than a human being, more godly. So the basic idea, in a short version, the concept of holiness are doing those things which makes a person act more in the way that God has revealed himself to act through the Torah.
One of the things the points that you make is that the nation of Israel was a nation that was to be an example for the other nations. That it wasn't something that it was supposed to force other people to observe the way they did. I think that happened once in Jewish history, and the result was King Herod. So this is something that Israel was to be an example for other people to follow, and then other people would see what Israel would do and want to follow that way. How are we doing right now as far as setting the example?
Well, and this is what Isaiah says. I think it's written on the side of the United Nations building. Someplace I once saw that the Jewish people are meant to be a light unto nations. And a light unto nations means that when people look at the Jewish people, they should be able to see, there must be a God. There must be. If these people are committed to do what they're doing over here, living by these rules and trying so hard to live up to a high standard of spiritual morality, there must be something to all of this, and I have to check it out for myself. And if I see it's true, I too will live up to a higher level of standard of morality. That's the object. That's the idea. Einstein, when he wrote E = mc squared, he was basically helping to understand how light works, and in a sense that was the light into the nations, but I don't think that was the light that God had in mind. The main light that God had in mind was one of morality, that we're supposed to be committed to these rules and these laws, and as he mentioned, not really rules and laws, but keys that unlock our potential to live on a higher level of spirituality. And not just to do that, but to do it as a unit, in complete unity. If you have dissension and you have disagreement, and some believe and some don't believe, then even the people who believe can't properly fulfill their function, because there's always going to be a group that makes them look as if they know what they're doing. So there has to be a unification also of the Jewish people around this belief that there is one God and that his Torah in fact is true, and that we have to live by it not just because we were commanded to do so, but because it is the best way to fulfill human potential and whatever level person is expected to live by it. And that is what it means to be a light unto the nations. At this stage of history, I don't want to point the finger or to be the one to criticize, but I think we could improve in that area and to be a better light, because when if the light ceases to exist, then darkness tends to reign, and when darkness tends to reign, we've seen the results of that historically, and it's not pleasant for anybody. So I think we have room to improve, as they say.
Sure. Now, one of the things also in Bible Basics that we're talking about right now is, and Bible Basics, by the way, this book is available, I believe you can get it on Amazon.com, or at least through your bookstore. Just order that. It's called A Fully Illustrated and User-Friendly Bible Basics is the title. An introduction to reference guide to the 5 books of Moses. The editor of the book is Jerome S. Hahn, and Rabbi Winston wrote the text of the book, and we're talking about some of that text. In the book also, you talk about once you understand the principles of holiness and various other things and what the laws are and how they apply, then you get into the aspect of character traits. Because that's really what the goal is to do through learning the laws, to change our character. Tell us a little bit about that.
I have to first. I'll give credit to the editor. This was Jerry Hahn was he was was his brainchild, and that was the idea of the character traits was a very important part of the entire project. Even though it was maybe just one section, but it was one of the main points he was driving towards in this entire project. But as I mentioned at the beginning, that man was made in the image of God, and as a result of that, he's expected to act as godly as possible. So the point of it's like going to university, it's like going to college on some level. where you can go to college and you can take the courses, you can get your MBA, and never change your life. It's just a way to get a degree, to be able to get a job and to get money. But at some point in time, it's going to show up. Part of the experience of going to college is the maturing of the individual, and hopefully to make the person more responsible. That is definitely one of the intentions behind the whole concept of going to school and education, not just become a professional, but to become a mature, responsible individual.
Mm-hmm.
And parents are supposed to view that also as the child's growing up. Unfortunately, it does not come through too much. The message is not as clear as it ought to be, which is why there's somewhat of a breakdown in the system. But that's the idea. So the same thing is true over here, that when God gave the commandments, and whether it's the 613 commandments that the Jewish people are expected to live by, or the 7 Noahide laws, which are supposed to be applicable to the non-Jewish nations, that the idea was the same. It was a way of focusing man on his inner spiritual potential.
We are talking with Rabbi Pinchas Winston. He is author of a number of books and also does quite extensive writing on various websites throughout the internet. We'll take a short break here. My name's Rick Richardson, and this is Origins of Our Faith, and we'll be right back. Well, we are back once again. My name's Rick Richardson, and this is Origins of Our Faith. Today we're talking with Rabbi Pinchas Winston. Well, why don't we at this time give out your website address and let people see some of the materials that you have up there and the books that you've written, including your latest book, the novel that we're talking about today, Not Just Another Scenario, and they can find out a little bit more about you. Could you give us that website address?
www.36, spelled THIRTYSIX.org.
Okay, 36.org.
Yep. .org.
Okay, and they can order your book right there. And may I also suggest that they check out the article that you wrote for Aish called Mashiach and the World Today. It's available, I think, still going into some of the archives on Aish. And if you can't find it there, I have also put it up on our website, originsofourfaith.com. And it's available just going to articles, and from there you can go right to that particular article by Rabbi Winston. Also available on your site are a number of different books that you've written on various, I find just basic living stuff. Just the how to live your life type material. Do you find there's a real lacking of people having a knowledge of how to live their life in a practical manner in today's society?
I mean, I think that's definitely the case. You find that a lot of people today have difficulty being able to keep proper perspective or to know how to do it. But, one of the distinction I think has to be made is that in some respects we're a much smarter society, but not necessarily a wiser society. People often assume that they're two, one and the same thing. To be smart and to be wise is the same thing. But I'm finding, for example, that my children, in many respects, know a lot more about me, what's going on in the world, and certainly in the world of technology, very quickly. And certainly when I was their age, I wasn't nearly as street smart as they are today, which is not necessarily a great thing, but still there's tremendous amount of knowledge amongst the younger generation. Yet when it comes to wisdom, they seem to be missing quite a bit of it, and which can be a very dangerous combination. So trying to make available this information about how the proper way to deal with money and how to look at suffering in the proper perspective, or again the difference between knowledge and wisdom and how to apply it. That was one aspect of it. The other aspect of it was basically trying to, again, bring sources to people who would never have a chance to see them or wouldn't think they would be valuable to look at in the first place. The goal is that they'll say, hey, this is very interesting. I learned a lot from this. It certainly was impressive what these rabbis had to say. I'd like to see more and to go to a class and begin their own study program.
And that is all available on 36.org.
Yeah, there's one spot on the site there for books and things like that. And the information is all there regarding how to order.
Well, Rabbi Winston, thank you for being with us on the program today. We've been talking with Rabbi Pinchas Winston. He is author of the book, Not Just Another Scenario. It's about the end of times, written from an Orthodox Jewish perspective. Check it out. I think you'll like it. Rabbi, once again, thank you for being with us on the program.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. This is Rick Richardson on Origins of Our Faith.